Hello again and welcome back to the History Channel. My name is David Stewart and today we'll be interviewing the 2nd Lieutenant of the 6th Battalion, a beloved soldier who has become even more so after his impressive actions on the battlefield today. Please welcome, straight from the battlefields of Ypres, Frederick Birks. How are you, Frederick?
Very well, thanks.
It's a pleasure to be here. Excellent. I'm sure our audience tonight would love to hear how you came to be a member of the Australian Army, and were there any other factors contributing to your decision to enlist, given you were born and raised in the United Kingdom? Well, I can imagine that people are wondering how a young man from Wales ended up a lieutenant in the Australian Army. Actually, I was born in the town of Buckley in northern Wales on the 16th of August 1894 and was raised there until I was 19 by my mother, Mary Williams. Tragically, my father, Samuel Birks, died in a coal mining accident when he was just 8 years old, leaving Mum to raise me and my 6 siblings by herself. I suppose I always grew up looking for the next adventure, which is why I migrated to Australia in 1913 and ended up working as a labourer in Tasmania and Victoria. I actually enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 18th of August 1914, just days after Britain declared war on Germany, because of my strong ties to Britain and that I felt it was my duty to support the cause as a part of the British Empire. Also, I was always looking for the next adventure, and the propaganda that was released by the government made me excited to fight for our country, and also travel the world and get paid 6 shillings a day. I didn't want to be seen as a coward by my mates either. I'm sure there were thousands of young blokes who felt the exact same way. I understand you were trained for war in Broadmeadows. What was it like? And how did it help you in the war zones? Yes, Broadmeadows was the largest war training camp in Australia at the time and was opened 2 weeks after the war was declared. They essentially took over Mornington Park, west of Melbourne, which was a large area of flat paddocks, making it suitable for military training and light horse training. They picked this area as they could fit in plenty of men in tents. I think there were about 2,500 men in training when I was there. Unfortunately, lots of people got sick as it would rain and turn the place into a quagmire, and there were limited facilities and terrible drainage. I was there for about 3 months and was made to practice tasks such as trench digging, basic gunmanship, and roleplay of war scenarios. These exercises didn't really help us because it was under controlled conditions, so it really only provided the basics on what war would be like, not the reality. This here is a picture of some of my mates at Broadmeadows after we stopped for a tea break. What were some of your daily tasks while you served as part of the Australian Army? Actually, my first post was as a stretcher bearer from the 2nd Field Ambulance in the Australian Army Medical Corps. I was initially deployed to Egypt, but in April 1915 I was sent to provide medical support in Gallipoli. Being a stretcher bearer was really rewarding work, as I got to help retrieve wounded soldiers from no man's land, because advancing troops were not allowed to stop and help them. But it was physically exhausting carrying men miles through muddy fields, trying not to jostle them and make their pain worse. It was also highly dangerous, with shells bursting right next to where I was rescuing the wounded. General Birdwood promoted me to Lance Corporal in August 1916 and awarded me the Military Cross in the field for constant good services as a stretcher bearer. After being promoted, I was selected for officer training and was commissioned 2nd Lieutenant in the 6th Battalion on the 4th of May 1917, which was my first major engagement as an infantryman. Being an infantryman was much more boring, as most of the day was spent digging and cleaning out trenches, cleaning weapons, carrying supplies, and doing sentry duty, with some fighting against the enemy. What are the conditions of the battlefields at Gallipoli, the Western Front, and Poitiers like? Life on the battlefields is tough. To be honest, I think we all thought this war would only last a few weeks, not years. On the Western Front, we have been living in these long, narrow ditches they call trenches, which are muddy and uncomfortable, but do provide some protection from the enemy. They are infested with rats which bite your face at night, and the floor is covered with the corpses of soldiers and a thick mud that is mixed in with the overflow from the toilets. These unsanitary conditions means many of us are constantly battling diseases such as trench foot, cholera and typhoid, as well as the emotional struggle of losing mates every day, or shell shock from being under constant bombardment. Trying to sleep is near impossible, as we are only allowed to sleep 1 hour at a time, and we often go for weeks in the same clothes. The field rations are monotonous and unappetizing, and we usually have to make one day's rations last 3. But we try make things more bearable by playing cards with our mates and writing letters home. Mateship is proving to be a key part of World War One. How do you feel your actions have contributed to this perception? My mates out here have provided unconditional support during the toughest conditions. Out here, it is more than friendship, as there is a reliance on each other for survival, mutual respect, and the shared experience and hardship. When I was a stretcher bearer, I believe I showed the other soldiers my unconditional support by constantly putting my life on the line to help them get to safety. Now, in my position as a lieutenant, I hope that my men know that I am here to lead them and support them to victory. Which battles were you specifically involved in? What was your role in these battles, and what were you trying to achieve? I have served at many fronts across the war, including Egypt, Gallipoli, the Battle of Somme, the Western Front, Marseille, in the Battle of Poitiers, and here, the Third Battle of Ypres. Primarily in these battles, I have been a stretcher bearer, carrying the wounded soldiers to safety. I would wait for the call to come, and then head out with my team, carrying stretchers and white flags, hoping no one would shoot us. We would travel out onto the battlefield on foot, unarmed, carrying the weight of the wounded through thick mud and gunfire, trying not to jostle them too much because any sudden movements could mean they die of shock or cause them immeasurable pain. Listening to them calling out for help and their families makes you just want to get back out there to help more of our men get to safety. Since arriving here for the Third Battle of Ypres as an infantryman, my goal is to gain as much ground as we can so that the Allies win the battle against the enemy. The more wins we can get under our belts, the closer we get to this war being over. You have received various commendations. Can you tell me about them? And do you think you deserve recognition, especially for your actions on the battlefield today? As I mentioned earlier, my first award was the Military Cross, which is the 3rd level military medal which I was awarded for my service as a stretcher bearer. As for today's actions, my battalion was advancing on Glencorse Wood, where a corporal and I rushed an enemy pillbox under bomb fire, which was holding up our advance. Unfortunately, the corporal was wounded, but I managed to kill those manning the pillbox and captured a machine gunner. I then organised a small party of soldiers to attack another strong point, where we captured 16 men and killed 9 others. They are now referring today as the Battle of Menin Road, and I have been advised that I am to be awarded the Victoria Cross, which is the highest, most prestigious award for most conspicuous bravery under attack. You have had a number of roles during your time in the armed services. Can you explain how you ended up as a trained officer? Because there were so many casualties in the first 2 years of the war, they began to run out of capable soldiers to be trained for officer positions. When I was promoted to Lance Corporal and awarded the Military Medal for leadership and service for my role as a stretcher bearer, I think they felt this would make me a good candidate for officer training. During officer training, I learnt about different military tactics, the use of different weaponry, and how to be a leader, all of which prepared me for later battles and have contributed to the success of today's Battle of Menin. Do you have any personal highlights during your time serving in the armed forces? I found it important to always try and help those around me in good spirits, so I've tried to spend time with my mates and develop those bonds by playing cards, having a smoke, and telling stories about our lives before the war. I will take these bonds forged through hardship with me forever, and I feel privileged to have walked this journey with so many fine men. As for achievements, I feel my award and promotions show my commitment to serving as a member of the Australian Imperial Force. Today's success in the Battle of Menin Road and the work I have done in reorganising parties of other units in order to consolidate forces during operations will put us in good stead for more successes moving forwards. However, personally, my highlight is the reward I would feel every time I successfully brought someone back to safety as a stretcher bearer. This feeling of doing right by another human is second to none. And finally, how did your perception on war change during the war? I think my stories today say it all. Everyone enlisted because the propaganda had told us that heading off to the Great War would be an adventure. An exciting journey where you would get to see the world, get paid and be heroes. However, the reality is that life on the battlefields is brutal. My perception on war changed when I quickly realized that the conditions are physically and emotionally draining. I have stepped over more bodies on the battlefields and seen more men die than I have brought back to safety, and the lasting effects of what I have seen has greatly affected me and thousands of other soldiers. Well, I hope you enjoyed our interview with Frederick Birks today, ladies and gentlemen, and remember to tune in next week as we interview the man responsible for World War II. Thanks again, this is David Stewart from the History Channel.